The events that have recently taken place in the Culling Games have completely shifted the balance of Jujutsu Kaisen's power ranking, and with Yuji being the only one of the newly promoted Culling Games trio who didn't win his fight outright, the validity of his strength has been brought into question in the minds of many Jujutsu Kaisen fans. Is Yuji currently underpowered? In this video, I'll be looking at Yuji's current power in the hopes of answering that question for you. Now, the answer to a question as vague as "is Yuji underpowered" is bound to be just as vague and illusory, so in order to have a discussion surrounding the question of Yuji's strength, I must first specify what underpowered means within the context of Jujutsu Kaisen, and specifically within the context of this video. Simply put, when I talk about the possibility of Yuji being underpowered, I am asking whether or not Yuji in his current state has the combative capabilities to keep up with the current intensity of the Culling Games, without receiving some sort of massive boost in power via a broken curse technique or some other means. Can Yuji handle what the Culling Games have to offer in his current state? The straightforward answer to this question is that even if he can now, he won't be a contender for much longer considering the direction that the Culling Games are going in. Yuji is by no means weak. He's a definitive grade 1 sorcerer and a character who on any given day can single-handedly defeat low to mid-tier special grade cursed spirits. In my opinion, he scales pretty closely to someone like Megumi, who I'd also consider a grade 1, and someone who was able to defeat an old age sorcerer in a 1v1. So he's not weak by any means. Under normal circumstances, Yuji would be near the top percentages of the verse, even with the lack of versatility that he currently presents technique-wise. His raw strength, speed, durability, combat prowess, and sheer potential for growth have so far been able to carry him throughout his time as a sorcerer. Unfortunately for Yuji, he is no longer in a circumstance that could possibly be considered normal. With the Culling Games bringing out some of the most powerful old age sorcerers and creating some current era fighters with stupidly high potential, it has been proven time and time again to the readers that Yuji right now simply does not have what it takes to individually match up to most of the top tiers in the games. Yuji is currently a medium-sized fish in an ocean of power, and nothing made this more clear than his fight with Higuruma and the fights of Yuta Okkotsu over in the Sendai colony. In relation to his own fight, his fight with Higuruma showed us that Yuji's lack of hacks and counter to high tier abilities such as domain expansions leave him open to being exploited and attacked by his enemies almost completely unguarded. And the fighting taking place over in the Sendai colony has shown that even Yuji's raw power is no longer all that impressive when compared to many characters that now exist within the world of Jujutsu Kaisen. Keep in mind that in relation to Higuruma, he didn't perform all that well. Like, immediately he got his cursed energy taken away, and then he was put in a position where he nearly died. If Higuruma hadn't had a character moment that convinced him to not kill Yuji and not turn his eyes away from the darkness of humanity, Yuji would have died right then and there and would have lost the fight. And keep in mind, Higuruma is not even a special grade sorcerer. It's stated by the narrator in chapter 165 that he was able to reach a level comparable to a grade 1 in a mere 12 days. Now, this is an insanely impressive potential for Higuruma, but this shows that Yuji doesn't even stack up to what current age sorcerers consider special grade. That's dangerous because we know that if you go back far enough into the history of sorcery, all the way back into the Heian period, the average level of sorcerer held there was much higher and most likely eclipses what current curses and sorcerers stack up to now. So for Yuji to almost lose his life in a fight against Higuruma shows that Yuji is not at the level he needs to be, and it shows that he's still wet behind the ears and overall a novice as a sorcerer. Now, to be fair to Yuji, it does make quite a bit of sense that he is completely ignorant to the world of sorcery, or at least partially ignorant, and he is still a bit naive because he's only been a sorcerer for a couple of months. However, the dire circumstances that he is in do not change simply because he didn't have enough time to prepare himself. If that wasn't enough, chapter 173 gives us a narrator statement that outright confirms Yuji hasn't even seen past the surface of what awaits him in this arc, as the Sendai colony's fighting was stated to have quickly surpassed that of the Tokyo colony. What this means is that even before Yuta showed up and wreaked havoc, the likes of Ishigori, Uro, Druve, and Kurorushi most likely scale above Yuji, Higuruma, Megumi, and Reggie outright. And if this statement wasn't enough for you, you can simply look at Yuta's fights versus the Cockroach Spirit, Uro, and Ishigori to reference the unbelievable gap in power that Yuji is experiencing. In each of these fights, Yuta is shown being pushed much further than he ever had in his scuffle with Yuji. Kurorushi was able to deal extensive damage to Yuta and force him to use reverse curse technique in order to heal himself. To compare, Yuji never even landed a direct hit on Yuta, much less damaged him to the extent of forcing him to use reverse curse technique. In this same vein, we know that both Uro and Ishigori forced Yuta to use reverse curse technique every time they hit him with a big move, which implies that he took enough damage to require the usage of a very cursed energy intensive move and in fact had to spam it. And as a result of this places them far and above the likes of Yuji, who saw Yuta as a terrifying combatant that he couldn't even damage. As shown throughout the entirety of the fight, but specifically in chapter 177, Ishigori was able to overpower Yuta physically in close quarters combat, and considering the relative ease in which Yuta was able to injure Yuji, this likely means that even without the use of Granite Blast, Ishigori could kill Yuji in just a few attacks. Uro has also shown that her Thin Ice Breaker attack could outright hurt Yuta, and like I've been reiterating, this means that Yuji would stand absolutely no chance to take this attack without suffering severe damage. In fact, to illustrate the gap between characters like Ishigori and Uro and Yuji, I'd go so far with this argument. Kurorushi, Uro, and Ishigori respectively could all beat Yuji in a 1v1 in under a minute. They all have feats that show they are faster or could at least land multiple hits on him in combat, and considering that every single one of them has an attack that could legitimately one-shot Yuji, I wouldn't say it's an exaggeration in the slightest to say that Yuji would get low diffed by everyone that we see Yuta fight on screen with in the Sendai colony. If you couple this with the fact that it's likely the strongest characters in these Culling Games haven't even fought yet, it doesn't really look good for Yuji in the power department. It's possible for him to pull out a win against a vastly stronger opponent if he was able to tag team them, as we've seen in many of Yuji's past fights, but in terms of individual capability, Yuji is underpowered. And in some way or another, he is in desperate need of a power boost, at least if he hopes to contribute to the unsealing of Gojo, the saving of Sumiki, and the stoppage of the Culling Games. I think it's very likely that Yuji will receive some sort of logical boost to his strength in the Culling Games, because as he is now, I simply don't see him realistically being able to contribute to the cause. Both him and Megumi in actuality need to get much stronger if they hope to survive in the Culling Games. However, for Megumi, getting stronger seems to be much more simple and straightforward. Master his domain expansion and tame Mahoraga. But as of right now, Yuji doesn't seem to have a path that would allow him to beat top tiers. With that being said, I trust the vision that Akutami has for his character moving forward, and I don't doubt that he has something planned for Yuji power-wise. In any case, I hope you guys did enjoy this video, and if any of you watching had this question in your mind after the recent events of the Culling Games, I hope that this video answered it. Subscribe and hit the bell for more Jujutsu Kaisen content like this, and I hope to see you all in the next video.